That was the iconic haka being performed at Thomond Park as the All Blacks played against Munster in 2008. An incredible bit of sporting theatre, I suppose, an iconic moment which is well worth looking up on YouTube. And the question is, why have I started off with that this week? I suppose there's two answers. Number one, it's nice to link in with last week's episode where we mentioned, obviously, the threat and the abuses that were carried out against the Maori culture and Maori language over generations. So it's a nice positive link with last week's episode, which was a little bit more austere and a little bit more depressing, shall we say. But the second reason is that by the end of this episode, I want you to have a different understanding of what you think of when I say Munster playing at Thomond Park. We're going to look at other things as well along the way, of course, but that's what I want you to focus on right now. Our goal for today, if last week we looked at language, our goal for today is to look at place names. Names that we say and see every day. Sporting stadiums, counties, cities, villages, everything that we would have around us, surrounding us at all times. Because the reality of the situation is that so often we say these names and they mean very, very little because, of course, they've been anglicised. The names we see on road signs, hear in the news, casually drop into our conversations, Dublin, Cork, Killarney, Kilkenny. These are anglicised versions of something that are far older, far deeper and far richer. Everyday names that have been inherited through a long and complex history, and the anglicised versions of them don't always do justice in most cases to the landscapes, the languages, and the legacies that they truly represent. Because behind every single one of those names lie stories shaped by geography, mythology, memory, stories that have been obscured, not necessarily fully erased, but certainly obscured by colonisation and translation. But here's the thing, right? Once we start to peel back those layers and reconnect with the original Irish names, something amazing happens. We begin to see these places and ourselves with new eyes. It opens up a new consciousness for us, gaining the true understanding of their true meanings. It invites us into a deeper relationship with the land and with our history. So today, Kharja, let's go on a journey through names that you know well, might not fully understand. We'll unpack a few examples here, trace their roots, and uncover the wisdom that they still carry. And in all of the examples today, Kharja, I'm after linking one to the other. So there's a little bit of a thread that we can follow because I feel that story element is the best way of teaching it. So, Kharja, Araigling le Kela. First of all, Kharja, it's worth noting that the anglicisation of our names, or our place names, didn't happen kind of overnight. It happened over a long period of time. The last, I suppose, nail in the coffin was probably around the 1830s with the Ordnance Survey Act, which happened around that time. And the goal of that was to anglicise all of the names in Ireland. From one point of view, it was to standardise them. From another point of view, it was to break that link, that historical link that existed between the people and the land. Because if you think about place names, it's language that links people with their places. It's a language that describes the landscape, the history, the story that belongs to a place. So this very, very powerful link between people and land, it's not entirely lost, but we can uncover it. So what we're going to do today, we're going to uncover. Now let's jump back to Munster. Before we go any further, we need to gain a deeper understanding of what we mean when we say Munster. So Muin, Munster, or Cuia Moon, if you want to say the province of Munster, Mua dates back to an ancient tribe in that area, and it's the name that settled on the area. Today we regard it as the 6 most southern counties on the island of Ireland, but over years and over history that area would have expanded and contracted as the power of various different. Tribes rose and fell. And it's worth noting as well that Mua originally comes from the name of a Celtic goddess. So this tribe, Mua or Muin, Munster's men, is probably the closest English translation we would have, comes from Mua, the Celtic goddess. And now, jumping back to the modern day, today's representation of Munster is normally in rugby or in GAA or in sport. In rugby, Munster wear red and they have their own unique kind of trademarked crest as well. But that crest is also linked with the other Munster crests that we see. And it dates back to a coat of arms that represented Cuigamoon or the Munster region for a long period of time. The background of it is blue, but what's going to lead our story here today is what's on the crest. And on that crest are 3 crowns. Those 3 crowns represent 3 kingdoms within Munster. And they're going to unlock the key to a lot of knowledge and a lot of words for us. Let's start with the obvious one, Thomond. So at the beginning of the podcast, I was saying Munster were playing at Thomond Park. But let's stop to think about what Thomond actually is or what Thomond means. Because what Thomond is an anglicisation of 2 words. Tua or Tuig, which means north, and Muin, which we know means Munster or the kingdom of the area. Tua meaning north, Muin meaning Munster. So the correct name for Thomond, or the original name for Thomond, is Thua Moon. Thua Moon. Essentially what we would understand to mean North Munster. Now this wasn't just a made-up name or a poetic name or anything like that. This was a real kingdom with a real king you may have heard of, Brian Boru. So Thua Moon, North, the area we would now consider to be North Munster, Limerick, Cúnta Limnach, and Clare and Clár. That's the area that would have been associated with Brian Boru. So he rose from this stronghold in the area in the 10th century to become the High King of Ireland. He was a warrior and obviously a legend, and he met his death at the Battle of Clontarf in 1014. But his descendants would have been known as, anglicised as the O'Briens, O'Brien, from Brian, in other words, from Brian Boru. And they would have kept a hold on Tua Moon for generations. So when we think about Thomond Park and we hear Thomond Park on the radio, we see it on the television, we see it in the newspaper, we see Munster playing there or whatever the occasion may be. Let's stop for a second and realise that this stadium wasn't named randomly and this area didn't get that name randomly. This was a deliberate nod to the land's legacy in that region. It has a deep meaning and it has a folklore and a history attached to it. Now, the second thing we can take from this is Tuig, Tua, or Ohuig. So Tua or Tuig means north. If you're heading in a northerly direction, you say you're going Ohuig. You're going Ohuig. So the H goes in there, softens it up, and you're going Ohuig. So let's make all those connections together. You think, right, Thomond, Tua Moon, North Munster. Ohuig, going north. So from that one little example, we put a kind of a thread together, a kind of a series of examples that are linked from one to the other. And all of a sudden, we have a history, we have a story, we have a bit of knowledge, and we look at this place and we look at these things that pop up in the newspaper, pop up on television. We look at them in a completely different light. Now, let's build on that a little bit. So, we know now that the O'Briens, descendants of Brian Boru, ruled the area of Tua Moon, which would be Thomond now in the anglicised version, from about the 11th century to the 16th century. The capital, if you could call it like that, would have been located around Killaloe and later Ennis, but they had strongholds throughout the area. They maintained a distinct Gaelic kingdom longer than many others, and while Anglo-Normans and Gaels mixed and created kingdoms together in other areas of Ireland, this one maintained its independence for much longer than the rest. So areas and seats of power within it would have been Bunratty Castle, Clonroad Castle, and Killaloe. This Killaloe essentially would have been the seat of Brian Boru, and it would have been the early spiritual political capital, I suppose. So when we think today of Thomond, let's think about Tuig Moon and think about all of that information and knowledge that goes with it. But if Thomond or Tuig Moon is represented by one of those crowns, what about the other two crowns? Well, if north is in one direction, let's go to the other direction. The opposite of north is south. And in Irish, it's das. So, O Huig is to go north, O Yas is to go south, or das. No, Tuig Moon or Tua Moon, the opposite of which would be Das Moon. Das Moon is south, or what would now be called South Munster. The anglicised version of Das Moon is Desmond. Yeah, Desmond, a name you would have heard a number of occasions in your life, whether it's Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, or more locally within our own area here, Desmond Castle at Kinsale, County Cork. Desmond Castle at Adair, which is pretty far up for the Das Moonig. The Desmond League in soccer. So in soccer, there's a regional soccer league in Limerick and North Kerry, which takes the Desmond League. There's a Desmond College within County Limerick. So Desmond, Das Moon, is the opposite, if you like, of Tua Moon. So what can we take from that? Well, first of all, let's take the compass direction. Das is south. To go in a southerly direction is to go O Yas. And the Desmonds, it's kind of like the South's forgotten kingdom in one sense. So the Desmond refers to the southern portion of the ancient province of Cuige Moon, on Das Moon. You're really talking about areas of Kirkig, of Cork, and of Keary, of Kerry. So this would have contrasted with Tuig Moon. In terms of its political history, it would have been ruled by the Fitzgerald dynasty, Mac Geralt, the son of Geralt. The nickname in English would have been the Geraldines. They would rule from about the 13th century to the 16th century. They were known as the Earls of Desmond. So these were a powerful Norman family in medieval Ireland. So these would have been Norman invaders, I suppose, originally. But as we all know, the saying that some of the Normans, the Normanig, that they became more Irish than the Irish themselves. And that's certainly the case with the Mac Geralts or the Fitzgeralds. These Mac Geralts, they would have rebelled against English rule on more than one occasion in the 1500s. And they were responsible for major uprisings against English rule throughout Cuige Moon. After the rebellions were crushed, much of the land and property of Desmond of Das Moon of South Munster was confiscated and colonised during the Munster plantations. So when we talk about the Munster plantations, the thing that triggered it from the British point of view would have been the uprising of the Mac Geralts of Das Moon of South Munster. So the second crown of the three that we looked at now on the crest of Munster or on the flag of Cuige Moon, this represents Das Moon, South, Das Moon. We've gone north, we've gone south, now let's turn to the east. So we've gone north, O Huig, we've gone south, O Yas, and now we're going to go to the third crown that appears on the flag of Cuige Moon. This is Moon, which means East Munster, Moon. Now, as I said earlier on in the episode, in today's thinking or today's categorisation of Moon, of Munster, we're talking about 6 counties. But parts of Vuin back in the day, East Munster, would have been up into Cuige up into today's Leinster. So beyond Tubberdorn, beyond Tipperary, and even into Kilkenny, into Kilkenny. because the anglicisation of Moon is Ormond. So there you go. That's a name you would have heard, I think about Brian Ormond, for example, Irish celebrity. Ormond is a name that we still would hear that lives on and that appears in places around East Munster, Moon, and up into Cuigaline, up into Leinster. So what about the Ormond or Moon dynasty? So this was the domain of the Butlers, de Butler Oscailga. So again, while the O'Briens would have been associated with Tuig Moon or Tua Moon, North Munster, and the MacGaralds, the Fitzgeralds, would have reigned in Das Moon, South Munster. The de Butlers of Moon, they would have aligned themselves closely with English power, becoming the Earls of Ormond and later even Dukes. And their Ormond Castle or Castlán Moon would have been at Carrick-on-Suir, which is actually a Tudor-style architecture, which gives you a hint as to their loyalties. But something that interests me around Moon. So if we took from Tuig Moon, North Munster, if we took from Tuig Moon the idea of Tua or Tuig, going north, going Ohuig, and we took from Das Moon the idea of going south, Dat Oyas, from Moon we can take the idea of going east. Now, a very interesting connection here is that the Irish verb for to get up, to rise, is airig, right? So if I said, I got up this morning, I would say, Dairig me Armaden. That's the past tense. Dairig me Armaden. Every day, I ream Armaden. Every day, I get up. Tomorrow, I roig me. So it's that ire is the constant part there of that verb. The reason why I find this interesting in the context of Moon is that there's a link between which we associate or means kind of east, with that verb. The reason being, of course, the sun rises in the east. So when you say Dairig me, it's like modelled on the sun rising in the east. Airig me or Dairig me or Airi would be the rising. So in the last podcast, when talking about Bobby Sands, I was talking about the Airi and the Galley. So that's the connection you can make there with a verb, to rise. The sun rises in the east, so Airig, there's your connection right there. Now, Kharja, at this point, we're after looking at 3 of the 4 directions. We're after looking at Huig Moon, or Tua Moon, North Munster, Das Moon, South Munster, and Moon, East Munster, which gives us north, south, and east. But I'd feel guilty if I left the podcast without teaching you about west. So I like to link these things together, and so far, the 3 place names that we've looked at have been linked together on the flag or the crest of Cuia Moon. But unfortunately, there's only 3 crowns on that flag. There's no 4th one. So I wanted to introduce into the story something that we could learn about the word west from. And it struck me that if you look at the map of Ireland today with the 32 counties of Ireland, you'll see that every single one of them is unique and individual, albeit anglicised, with the exception of Westmeath. So you have the county of Meath and you have the county of Westmeath. We might often joke that maybe the 33rd county is West Cork, for example, but there's no other county with a compass point in it. So let's explain now why there is a Meath and there is a Westmeath. Now, I do like it when there is a connection to what went before. So in this case, there actually is a loose connection, because we started out with telling the story of one of the provinces of Ireland, Cuia Moon. And obviously in the modern day, we have 4 provinces. In English, they're known as Munster, Ulster, Leinster, and Connacht. Oscailga, you've got Cuia Moon, Cuia Ola, Cuia Line, and Cuige Connacht. Now, the interesting thing about that is the Irish word we have for province is Cuiga. Now, think about your numbers when you're counting to 10. A hain, a do, a tree, a cahar, a cuig, a she, a shacht, a hocht, a ne, a de. The fifth number is cuig. So when we say Cuiga Moon, which we understand to be the province of Munster, the word Cuiga comes from a fifth. So Cuiga Moon. It's like saying it's a fifth of Ireland, but there are only, in the modern day, 4 provinces. Now, over time, there's been different kingdoms in Ireland, whether it's Breffni or, in this case, Meath, because at one stage, Meath would have been regarded as a province on its own. So, the Irish for it is County an Mhí, the county of Meath. The meaning of County an Mhí, or an Mhí, is the middle or the centre. And this is something that's very apt for County na Meath, because it's not just geographically towards the centre of Ireland. At one stage, all of the political power in Ireland would have been centred in that region, because that's why County na Meath is known as the Royal County, because this would have been an area where, the kings and queens of generations and generations ago would have had their seat of power and would have been given their political power, crowned, if you like. Anyone familiar with County Meath or County an Mhí and the area surrounding it will be familiar with the Hill of Tara. So within the Hill of Tara, this would have been the symbolic seat of Ard Rí na hÉireann, the High King of Ireland. The idea of Tara comes from Tower na Rí. So Meath was seen as a neutral royal ground. So this is really, really important when you have different tribes and different clans around the same island. This would have been a neutral spot for them to meet, to elect a High King, an Ard Rí, and this would have been something that would have had immense political power throughout the country. So now we know the meaning of Meath or an Mhí. What's the story with Westmeath? So if we accept that Meath an Mhí was once an extremely powerful political dynasty or dynasty within Ireland, then its destruction or its partition is very, very symbolic. So 1543, an Mhí, Meath, is formally divided or partitioned into an Mhí and Iarmhí by the English crown during Tudor reforms. So this is, again, an outside interference attempting to break a political power block within Ireland. So previously Meath would have been regarded as a sacred site, a sacred stronghold, a sacred province, if you like, because it was regarded as a Cuiga at one stage. So this is an attempt to dismantle it and to break its power. Now, if Tara is a famous area or a spiritual site within County an Mhí, Uisneach lies within Westmeath. So that is an extremely powerful political and spiritual mythological site within Iarmhí. And this is what's going to teach us the word for west. So again, jump back. Tuig Moon, North Munster. Das Moon, South Munster. Irvuin, East Munster. And Iarmhí is Westmeath. So Ear is the word for west. Now, if you're travelling in a western direction, you say, Tom ag dul sheer. Tom ag dul sheer. Time, I am, ag dul, going, sheer, west. Now, I nearly said back there. And this is kind of an interesting hangover from the split between, or the colonization of our language. Because if sheer means west, but sheer also means back, I've often heard people say when they're going west that they're going back. I'm going back west. I'm going back to Kerry. I'm going back to West Cork. So this is basically a situation where sheer, back, has passed directly as a description of the direction that you're going in. Táimid dul sheer. So, from our point of view, in today's story, we're after touching on all of the compass points, and the latest one is ERV, Westmeath. So that's the reason why we have a partitioned Cúnta Meath today. That's the reason why that political power of Meath was brought to an end. And with that, Accordia, that's episode 6. Episode 6 in the bag. Really, really enjoyed that one. The purpose of this is for you, obviously, to get a bit of escapism, a bit of enjoyment out of this. But of course, it's a lovely way to learn bits and pieces as we go along, whether it's the language, whether it's the folklore, whether it's the history, and put it together in a story form. So if I've done my job right on this podcast, the next time you see Munster playing at Thomond Park, you'll think about it very, very differently. In your head, you'll be thinking about Cuiga Moon playing, of course, at Tua Moon. You'll be thinking about the historical significance behind that. You'll be thinking about the thread of story that is there. And there is something very, very beautiful about it. Think back to the very start of the episode where we had the Maori haka taking place in Thomond Park. Now let's imagine for a second that this is the spiritual expression of one native group of people in the form of the Maori haka taking place in a stadium which is named in honour of the dynasty or the cultural or the clan that ruled that area for so long, directly linked right back to Brian Boru, one of the last and most famous High Kings of Ireland. There's something very spiritual about that. There's something very powerful in that connection. And there's something very, very powerful in all of our place names around this country. And all we need to do is lift the lid a little bit, look at the original version of it, pull the thread, find the story. So if I've done my job right in this podcast, you're going to open your consciousness a little bit now. The next time that you see a street sign, the next time you see a road sign, have a look at those italics. Those ones really should be in bold, because that's the real meaning. It should be underlined. That's the real meaning. That is the real story. That is the real history. And it's right in front of us. And all we need to do is go undercover and lift the lid and have a look at it. I've really enjoyed this. Like I said, it's great to have episode of Shay in the bag. This is an independent podcast, obviously, Accordia. So we're up against the Vogue Williams and all this of this world. If you've enjoyed it, if you are enjoying the podcast so far, please do share it with a friend. Send it into your WhatsApp groups. Share it on social media, because independent podcasting relies upon, the support of listeners to sustain it and to get the word out. Also, Accordia, if you'd like to follow me, have a look at Instagram, Undercover Irish. I'd be delighted to get a message or any bit of feedback at all. Please let me know what you've thought of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed putting it together and putting it out to you. So until the next time, Accordia, Berigi Bua, agus Slán live.